In September of 1991, towards the beginning of what was about to be my sophomore year in college, the first friend I ever made in college, and indeed in the city I still live in, brought to my dorm a promo cassette without any artwork of an album that was about to be out in about a couple of weeks. We got really high in my dorm room. He was no longer matriculated at the university. And we went downstairs, got the munchies, went downstairs to the vending machine in the lobby of my college dorm or my hall, and noticed that we could stick our arms up into the vending machine and grab snacks. So we had just listened to this tape. We were like amped up. The music really grabbed us. We were high as kites, both of us, and we're downstairs. I'm still humming songs from this album in my head as I'm reaching in and giggling and grabbing chips and Oreo cookies or whatever. And my friend's like, don't be greedy, don't be greedy. Go upstairs, listen to the album some more, and proceed to have like more, completely be blown away by this album again throughout the night. The following day, my RA or resident advisor in the dorm comes into the doorway of my room and is talking to me, and he's kind of grinning, and he's like, you're going to be written up for breaking into the vending machine. And I'm like, how did you know about that? And he goes, Sabby, I was talking to you while you were doing it. And then it came back to me, and I was like, oh my God, yeah. Anyway, the album in question was of course, Badmotorfinger by Soundgarden, who have been one of my favorite bands for, I wouldn't say quite as long as I can remember, but I was 17, maybe 16, 17 when I first heard them. They've been a big part of my life, not just listening life, but my life, musically speaking. I mean, I'm not like a super fan type who's like always obsessing over every little thing online, but the music, the body of work is a big part of my life. And I recently conducted 2 interviews on back-to-back days with Kim THAYIL of Soundgarden about his memoir, A Screaming Life, which was out last month in June. The link is in the show notes. That interview stretches to about 2 hours and 15 minutes or so over the 2 nights. And since that's been on my mind a lot, and since I went back, I read the book, I listened to it, and then brushed up on the music on certain songs I hadn't heard in a long time, it's just been on my mind. Concurrently with that, I've got a lot going on in my life, both for better and, just a lot of intensity sort of on all points of the color wheel. And I find that sometimes the best response when you've got a bunch of serious stuff is to just kind of lighten up a little bit. And I just did a Van Halen ranking, and I had set out to do a Soundgarden ranking in that same episode. I ended up talking about Van Halen for 2 hours straight. So here we are. Welcome. I am Sabby Reyes Kulkarni, the apostate music journalist. Welcome to the 56th Feedback Deaf live stream, an ongoing conversation about music, memory, meaning, and life, and sometimes just about album rankings and music I like, just shooting the shit about that. Please do hit all the buttons. There's ways to support the channel. You can make a donation you can buy me a coffee. You can make a donation via Cash App or Venmo. Every little bit counts. More than that, I just appreciate you being here, and I would urge you to comment, whether during the live stream or afterwards. This is a monologue, but I love for it to be a dialogue. Okay, Soundgarden, I will try to sum up quickly. They are, I guess, the shortest thumbnail description that the average casual fan of music would like maybe resort to right off the bat, or even that VH1 and outlets like that, Rolling Stone would describe them as 90s icons. or avatars of alternative rock, like the guitar rock era of the 90s, and certainly of grunge more specifically. Their history and their body of work is more nuanced than that. Um, yes, they are those things that I just mentioned. They are also metal adjacent. They had a very heavy approach a lot of the time. In fact, even the majority of their body of work is very close to heavy metal, if not tipping over into the line. Some of it is quite sludgy. They were known for detuned guitars, lots of exotic tunings, but detuned guitars, much like their Seattle peers, taking after the Melvins, who were the first to do that, and then a bunch of other Seattle bands followed. Soundgarden were among the first crop of bands who followed the lead of the Melvins. But Soundgarden also brought a lot of exotic tunings, very idiosyncratic approach to rhythm, herky jerky, and they also had a very pronounced post punk, goth, like sort of post what like a sort of hardcore punk, arty art punk kind of um, mentality, which although it isn't necessarily obvious as they got more popular and their work got more sort of what we would consider more traditional or archetypal alternative rock, so to speak, it's there the whole way through in their body of work. It's like an undercurrent. And a lot of times that is obscured by their image. They definitely had a flannel, grunge looking sort of stereotype image. Chris Cornell was often shirtless and he had long hair and could easily be misconstrued as this like beefcake, image conscious, sort of fashion plate guy who was like wailing and with his voice all the time. And I think they didn't do themselves any favors with their videos and where they ended up being categorized in sort of like the public's memory doesn't really quite do justice to just how much range they had. And even when they were playing music that you could say, "Oh yeah, that's grunge. It's detuned. It's sort of slow and crunching and has this like very heavy-footed, like march-like vibe to it." There was a lot more going on under the surface, and even at times on the surface. And so, as far as I am concerned, they are of all the bands that were put under that Seattle umbrella, by far the most interesting and um, the most nuanced. They also had this amazing. Once you get to a certain point in their history and their a certain lineup clicks in to place, they had this amazing four-way chemistry that my all-time favorite bands tend to have that. Uh, Something that is just this magical alchemy between that set of people that each person brings something crucial to the entire recipe, and it almost can't even it's almost intangible. It's like I can sort of identify what it is, but you don't know why it is that this particular set of people has that magic. They definitely had that, especially from a certain point onwards. And like I said, they've been a huge part of my listening life and really my life since. Uh, I actually discovered them in 1989, and I'll talk about it when I get to that album. That was the first time I heard them, and was a fan, was on board right away. And it's like as I grew, they grew more complex. But then I went back into their history and realized they had already been more. There had already been more to them than what was presented to me when I first discovered them. In other words, the way they were marketed so that they reached me on a heavy syndicated metal radio show named Metal Shop. I'm pretty sure that's where it was. Um, there had been more breadth to what got them there. So I want to talk about all that, rank their albums. Rankings are, of course, dumb. I cannot stand it when people are like, the best so and so's albums from best to worst. I can only talk to you about what my favorites and least favorites are. I am not right. You are not wrong if we disagree. In fact, we could even have the exact same order of favorite albums and love different songs or love those albums for different reasons. So there's no right or wrong to any of this, is why it appalls me that people are like, oh, the best or the worst. No, this is better. Which album is better? And you see this on Reddit all the time. People sending these flares up, trying to validate, users on Reddit posting, which is the best album. And it's like, well, why are you not just listening to your ears? Why do you have to focus group test this against some consensus in a group? Why does that matter? I just like to talk about how I stack albums, and would be curious to hear how you stack yours. Now, I'm not going to be including a bunch of other stuff that I'd normally include. I usually do side projects. I'll usually count a lot of stuff that is like just has a connection to the artist. I'll throw in my favorite bootlegs on YouTube if I want to. I'll consider those like as meaningful to me as albums when they are. I'm not going to be doing any of their live releases. I won't be talking about the rarities collections like Telephantasm or Echo of Miles. I won't be including any of the bonus discs on the Badmotorfinger and Super Unknown Super Deluxe box sets. I won't be including the King Animal demos, anything by Hader or Wellwater Conspiracy, or Chris Cornell's solo or Temple of the Dog, or Chris Cornell's solo album Euphoria Morning, or Audio Slave. I think that would confuse things for me because I'm just going to talk about the main 7 releases. And yes, I consider Soundgarden as having 7 full lengths, not 6. But I'll talk about that as well. Okay, so I think I've set it up. I think I will be playing a couple little song snippets because it really doesn't make any sense for me to talk about albums and not give you a little taste. But I mean, there's going to be one 15-second little blip from each album. Those little clips do not tell the story of these records. There's way too much going on each of these albums for that to even, that's like barely touches the tip of the iceberg, but that's kind of how we'll keep it. So, all right, I'm going to start with at the bottom of my list. This is the only album by this band that I just straight up don't like. And a lot of it is the way it was recorded. I'm talking about ULTRAMEGA-OK, which is often referred to as the band's debut because it's their debut full length. Was not intended to be their debut. It was actually conceived as their sophomore album, which I'll get into. If you read Kim Thayil's book, and if you've heard this album and wondered why the guitar sounds so thin on it, this is something he details in the book. In fact, when they were recording in Portland, Oregon with Drew Canelette, who was like an in-house guy at SST Records, the band decided to record on SST, which is like an iconic, and still is, an iconic underground label founded by the guitar player and Chuck Dukowski of Black Flag, the legendary hardcore band. And so they put out all these amazing underground titles. Soundgarden were already being courted by a major label, and I think to kind of give themselves a little bit of cred, they decided to go with SST first for ULTRAMEGA-OK, just so that I suspect Thayil tells a different story. He's like, well, we wanted to make sure we were working with people who understood how to market us to the people who were already our fans. We didn't want to get lost in the shuffle with a major label that did not know how to communicate with our audience. that makes sense. I also think they were like making a calculated move so that when the inevitable calls of, oh, you sold out because you signed with A&M Records came, they could say, oh, we just worked with SST. In any case, I think this album was very badly recorded. THAYIL talks about how he could tell that the sound in the room of his guitar, he had dialed in a tone that he was happy with, that was not translating to tape. Nobody else noticed it. None of his bandmates did. And he said he was so angry, he went out for a walk and felt so angry he could cry about it. And so that's what we got. I think the performances are kind of, I don't know if the performances are flat. I think the sonic space created by this record is flat. And I don't feel it conveys much energy or soul or anything. It just kind of drags a little bit. It feels very, very misconceived or halfway conceived to me, this album. I'm going to play you a touch, a tiny bit, and let you judge for yourself. Let's see. Okay. So this is from the re-release of this album. This was mixed anew by Jack Endino, who recorded Soundgarden's first. Well, I'll get to that in a little bit, but this was mixed anew. I don't think there was that much that could be done with this album. It actually doesn't sound all that different than it once did. This is my favorite moment from this. This is not the song Head Injury. We're about to go into another song. This song I legitimately love.
Imagine.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was going to fade that out anyway. So that is a little taste of a song called Incessant Mace, which I didn't realize Chris Cornell wrote about not wanting to become like your dad. And that tune, as it goes along, really establishes this incredible sense of mood. It's almost like an incense. That song, it just has this permeating vibe, which I think clearly they were going for on the whole album, and you see traces of it on songs like Flower and Beyond the Wheel. I know Metallica, James Hetfield is a big fan of this album. Metallica covered the song All Your Lies, which is almost not proto, but quasi thrash. They did that at the Chris Cornell tribute show. There are certainly moments. I don't think there's an issue with the writing. It's just the way the vibe feels stifled on this record that I think just handicaps it. Other than that one moment that I just played for you, I don't find transcendence on this album the way I do pretty much everywhere else in their catalog. So in the number 6 slot, I am going to go with their only reunion album to date, although they are putting the finishing touches on what will ultimately be their final work. I'm going to go with King Animal from 2012. So the strange thing about this album, in terms of my response to it, is that I think it mostly does not retain the qualities that made this band so special. So I almost don't consider it a real Soundgarden album. Most of the qualities I love about this band are absent here. The overall sense of chemistry, Matt Cameron's drums, the 2-guitar interplay, the unorthodox, intangible thing that made their writing so distinctive, Ben Shepherd's artistry, bass player Ben Shepherd, his quirky approach to writing. Chris Cornell's voice, even to me, doesn't match the quality, not the quality, the character, the timbre that I love so much from their classic period. And yet, I still like it. If this had been released by another band in 2012, I'd have been like, oh, I dig this. In fact, I do dig it. I don't think it captures the band I know and love, the band I fell in love with, but I like it, even though it's not the band I know and love, but I like it. Even though it's not the band I know and love, but I like it. Oddly, Kim Thayil's solos, which were the thing that I had noticed and appreciated the least during this band's run, from when I first heard them in '89 up through, ever since. That's what I noticed the least. That's the thing I tuned into the least about this band. It wouldn't have even been the first thing that, not even close. It wouldn't have even made the list of things that I appreciate. But his solos are the only thing, the only aspect of their whole thing that I think survived the absence completely intact. It was actually this album that cemented, sparked my appreciation for his solos on the classic material. I think he sounds completely untouched by the fact that they spent so many years apart. But I really like this album. And here's the really odd thing about it. In the parts where they go completely off the rails into like, what the fuck? Like territory, where I would think, oh my God, this band is going to fall on its face trying some out there shit that is so out of character, it's just going to be embarrassing. That's actually where this album is the most interesting to me and even the most appealing. A bunch of songs on here: Blood on the Valley Floor, Worst Dreams, Eyelids Mouth, Black Saturday, Rowing. If you described those last two songs that I just mentioned on paper, Black Saturday and Rowing, I'd be like, that sounds like such a messy, cringe-worthy recipe. It's like, I would think like Rowing is their take on like a slave spiritual. And if you put that on paper, especially where Chris Cornell had been coming from his solo career, having made the album Scream, and that falling on its face and being really just this very ill-conceived mishmash of styles, I would have said for a lot of those songs I just mentioned, or all of them, that's going to be like the musical equivalent of watching a cow have a miscarriage. It's going to be messy and ugly and hideous and just like, why does this even exist? Why am I watching this? And yet, I love those songs. I legit love those songs. And it's strange because I always just like shrug this album off and even have a bit of an aversion to it whenever I think about it. Because, I see the pictures and I see the graphic design is different, and like I see Chris Cornell's image and they look older, and it's like, oh, this is not the band I fell in love with. I feel that way until I sit down and listen to it. And even the demos that they released as the deluxe edition, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. I was annoyed, though, when Chris Cornell tried to push the idea, and he did this in an interview with me, but I watched him say it, I think, elsewhere too, that the song that starts the album, Been Gone Too Long, he's like, well, that's not actually a reference to, we're not actually referring to the fact that we were gone too long. It's like, come on, man. Like, you're putting you're putting the first song on an album that you're releasing in what at that point would have been 15 years or 16 years. And it's called Been Gone Too Long. And then you're going to be like, no, actually, that's not at all what we meant. It's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's just like, don't lead us around, but try to lead us around by the nose. Like, yeah, you named it like that, specifically referencing the fact that you were gone. That's just a small quibble. Um, I don't think this is a case of a band recapturing its past glory. There's only one band I can think of that ever spent that much time apart and somehow came back with its essence intact, and that's the band Failure. That's the only one I can think of, or the one I know of. I don't think these guys did do that. However, I think this is a fine album, and in spite of that, they still made a record that I really, really, really enjoy. So whatever my sort of mental asterisk I put on it, the music comes to the front and says, "Hey, hey, 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 screw your mental asterisk. I'm here, and you like me." So that's that. Let me play you a tiny bit. My favorite moment actually on this album that really does make my hair stand up. But this is going to be in progress already, but this is my absolute favorite moment on this record, and there are quite a few actually, really really stunning moments. Like I said, some of the ones that really are, I'm just like, what? That worked? How does that work? That sounds like it's like the peanut butter and chocolate commercial for Reese's, where it's like, that's not going to work. That sounds horrible. That some of these ideas sound like peanut butter and banana sandwich, or peanut butter on like salami or something, right? And you're like, ugh, gross, but they work. This is not one of those moments. This is not that unconventional. It just it just touches on this mystical quality that these guys had so much in spades in the past. This instills that same sense in me, this section of the song right here.
Not looking for a brighter side. Looking steps will take me higher. I don't care if you wanna It's a deep, deep river.
Just gonna fade that out. Very ungraceful fade. My apologies. That is beautiful. Just that. It's so mystical and beautiful. I love it. I'm really grateful for that record, actually. Um, and again, I need to spend more time with it. I listened to it recently for this, and I was like very pleasantly surprised. Again, it's like every time I sit down and listen to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a pleasant surprise. It's like, well, don't you know that by now? Duh. So, okay, moving on to the number 5 slot. In fact, let me play you something. Let me see. Do I want to play this first? Um, let me say this. The fact that I have this album ranked so low is not a reflection of my appreciation level, because I actually love this stuff. THAYIL also in his book talks about how much he loves the tone and the ambience of this release. I do as well. Um, you know, uh, this is something I discovered. This is something I went back and found after I had heard Louder Than Love and Badmotorfinger. I'm talking about their first, what was supposed to be their first album, called Screaming Life, uh, which I consider an album. I'll explain to you why in a moment. But let me play you this moment and then share my thoughts. Oh, whoops. Here I am grooving, and I didn't even wait a minute. I gotta back this up. Sorry. Take two. Okay, let me let me go. Let me actually play you the track. Sorry about that. I was like all into it and stuff. All right, here we go. Boop. So there you really hear, I mean, like those chimey harmonics from THAYIL. You really, in that tune and on that release overall, hear their goth influence. This was mostly from co-founding bass player Hiro Yamamoto, who lived in a house with Chris Cornell. They started jamming, and as THAYIL tells in his book, Yamamoto, who had moved from a suburb of Chicago to Seattle with THAYIL, they both grew up there. They didn't grow up together, but they knew of each other. And they moved to Seattle. Bruce Pavitt, one of the founders of Sub Pop, also grew up there, and they did know THAYIL did know the Pavitts, Bruce and his family. So Yamamoto and THAYIL moved to Seattle. They arrived there in 1984. Yamamoto falls in with Chris Cornell, and they had all played individually and sort of to sometimes like a couple of them at the same time in a band called the Shemps, which was not the precursor to Soundgarden. THAYIL is very clear about this in the book. But Yamamoto begins jamming with Chris. THAYIL did not know Chris was a drummer. Chris was actually a drummer, but he had sang in the Shemps. And he's like, wait, the singer from the Shemps? He goes, no, he's actually a drummer. Can you come jam? Can you come jam? THAYIL's like, nah, I'm not really into it. I'm busy, way too busy for that. He didn't really think it was going to amount to much. Ultimately, he caves in, and he says the three of them have instant chemistry when Chris is on the drums. A little bit of history goes by. Chris switches to vocals. They get Scott Sundquist. Scott Sundquist then leaves. Then they get Matt Cameron, formerly of Skinyard, and they record Screaming Life. They record a full length's worth of songs, but Bruce Pavitt convinces them to release it as an EP instead. Later, there was a subsequent EP named FOP, which with their cover of the song FOP by Ohio Players gets tacked onto that. It's released in 1990 or 1990, somewhere along there, as Screaming Life / FOP. That's what I end up hearing. So I end up experiencing this as a full-length album. By the way, the unreleased songs from this session still have not seen the light of day. I'm sure they eventually will, because THAYIL is a big archivist, and he's the one who oversaw Echo of Miles and Telephantasm, and has often expressed his desire to have this album in its original form released, although those songs were not mixed, so they'd have to be mixed anew. But this was recorded by Jack Endino, and you can hear it there. You can hear that brooding, just gorgeously, like it's almost like looking at a scene in like a nighttime scene from a film that is really heavy with atmosphere and mood and almost dark, but still has this like almost this like a floral beauty about it. THAYIL loves the way the band was captured on here. I have always loved the way the band was captured on here. I think this recording sounds incredible, and I find it far it connects with me far more than Ultra Mega OK. I feel like Ultra Mega OK was an unfortunate misstep in their progression, because starting from here, had they actually advanced and leveled up from there, who knows what we would have gotten on Ultra Mega OK, and it just didn't happen. But this is a really auspicious start for this band. And when you go from here all the way to where they ended up, and yes, they do have material that predates this. They tried to record a full length with Scott Sundquist. They have various demos, I think, or rehearsal recordings and things like that. But if you kind of consider this is their first stab at their first really successful, legitimate stab at recording, all the way to where they ended up in '96, it's pretty staggering to take in how far they, just how far they traveled. But the seeds are there. everything you hear later on from them, you can hear the seeds. It just develops more as they go along. So, for my number 5, it's Screaming Life / Fop. I love their cover of Fop, by the way. I think it's one of the few covers. Well, isn't one of the few. There's actually a couple of other covers of theirs I really like. I wouldn't say they're the most soulful or soul compatible, R&B funk compatible band, but I really do think they captured something in the spirit on that recording. It's not just ironic, like fucking around just to be snide. That's I legit, like, had I seen them live playing that at a show back then, I'd been like, yeah, this sounds really, really cool. And they don't overly rock it up. They don't make it like heavy metal, too muscular. It's slinky, and I think for them that's really impressive. So next, in the number 4 slot, I debated this. I debated for a while whether my number 4 and number 3 selections should switch, and I kept switching them back and forth. So I think I'm going to talk about them at the same time. I probably should. Let me first play the first thing I ever heard from this band off of this next album that I'm going to talk about. This made an immediate impression on me. Again, I was in my teens, and this is what I heard. I mean, look, I've already gone way over the copyright like limit anyway, but I wanted to give you a taste of that specifically, not just because it's the first thing I heard, but because it's almost shoegazy. This cascading flow of guitar after guitar after guitar, these like 2 different players just layering these beautiful, like, glimmering parts, I guess. I'm trying to find a word for them, but it's almost got a My Bloody Valentine influence there, or like a Sonic Youth type mentality or something. I think that drum beat, I remember playing it for a friend who I've mentioned on this channel quite a bit, the guy who introduced me to Rush, my older friend Wilson from my neighborhood, on the block I grew up on. I played that for him, and he goes, "Oh," I was like, "Who does this sound like?" He goes, "Oh, Zeppelin." This album is produced by Terry Date, who worked with Pantera and a bunch of other heavy bands, Prong. He hadn't worked with Pantera yet, though. He also produced a Fishbone album too. Deftones obviously were later, but known to me as like a metal producer. I remember this album being marketed that way, and there was a pull quote in one of the ads for it that said, in the tar pit where the remains of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath lay fossilized, this band Soundgarden combines elements of both. And I think that's an unfortunate, way too obvious way of presenting what this album is. I can see why someone like me, like a teenage metalhead, got into them, as so many others did. There's a heaviness to this album. It's more overtly metallic than what they did in the past prior to this. And at the same time, well, it's sort of recorded that way too, but at the same time, I think there's a lot more going on, and I I do have somewhat of an issue with the production on this album. I think it sounds kind of thin, or it's more of the mastering, really. It doesn't breathe as much as I would like, but nevertheless, well, like if I make a playlist, the songs on this album stand out like a sore. They stick out like a sore thumb. They don't have the fullness of the later material sonically. Nevertheless, though, if I just listen to this album from start to finish, I really, really, really enjoy it. I think as a complete listen, it's really an enticing, an enchanting journey. And I love some of that atmosphere again, like the way those guitars are ringing out and the way the guitars are mixed on this album. I think just makes for this head trippy experience that I think is just wonderful. This is the last album to feature, or this is the last album with Hiro Yamamoto, and their whole history changes, their whole trajectory changes after that. But I really, really dig this album. I saw them twice after this album was released. Um, whenever I think about it, I'm like, the production. But if I just allow it to be, if I step into the world and the space of the album itself without comparing it to anything else, I love being there. So that's my number 4 pick, Louder Than Love. I didn't even name it. And that is their major label debut. That's the first record they did with A&M. Now, the next album that I almost had in the number 4 spot and put below Louder Than Love is Super Unknown. It is their highest seller. It is the one with their biggest hit song, Black Hole Sun. And I almost put it lower because as a complete start to finish listen, I like Louder Than Love more. However, there's a stretch of tunes on here that is so sublime, and the band is reaching so much more. It's so much more ambitious. It's such a more developed musical unit. Like their creativity has grown almost exponentially compared to Louder Than Love. I couldn't, with good conscience, put Louder Than Love above it because I just feel like the artistic reward is greater, even though I think this album really suffers from a disjointed song sequence. Like there are a couple of momentum killers almost out of the gate. So number one, I've never, still to this day, and it's 32 years later. And by the way, this album, the same friend that brought the cassette of Badmotorfinger brought this album and the Downward Spiral, which were released on the same day. I believe it was April or March. It was March of 1994. He brought it to my house where we also got stoned, and we listened to both, which that was incredible. But the first tune on here is called Let Me Drown. To this day, I cannot tell you whether I like that song or not. I don't know what to make of that song. It does not necessarily grab me. It's got this murky sound to it. There's something about it that I find impenetrable. And then you go into My Wave, which I love. And then you have a song named Mailman, which ultimately I did come to love. This super sludgy, abrasive, almost boiling tar, bubbling tar pit of a song. It's like a heated giant vat of bubbling tar, just right. I do love the song, but to me, it almost derails the album in the number as the third track. And then you go from there to this sort of poppy, pop-ish, pop adjacent. I don't know, not pop. It's not pop, but it's like more commercial, straight ahead, sort of adult contemporary song called "Fell on Black Days," which I'm not crazy about that song either. And so already it's like where are we? Then the stretch of tunes that I think is absolutely sublime. It's how many songs? I think it's 6 songs in a row. Let me see if I can do it in my head. Super Unknown, Head Down, Spoon Man, and Limo Wreck. And I think I'm skipping one. Let me see. Unknown. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. What the fuck? Where's the track listing? All right, so I skipped one. Black Hole Sun. Duh. So okay, so it's Super Unknown, Head Down, Black Hole Sun, Spoon Man, Limo Wreck, and I would also include The Day I Tried to Live. So that's 6 tunes in a row that are just like, damn, oh my god. Like totally sublime. They're full. Again, the production I find murky. It's like there's this gauze around this album sonically that I my ear can't quite totally get through. It's like there's clouds around it. However, the songs I love, that doesn't get in the way at all. Though that stretch of 6 tunes, and then there are other ones on here too. I love Fresh Tendrils. I love Half. I love Like Suicide. I love My Wave, but it's a little herky jerky on the front end and on the back end. It doesn't, as grand as they're trying to be, they don't sustain it from start to finish. I think the album is almost too long. I actually don't have a problem with super long albums, but if you're not going to keep the flow going, if you're going to kind of throw things in there that feel like clunky, then something is going to feel too long. It's going to feel like a slog. I would have moved things around a little bit. I wouldn't have maybe started with that song. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done, but this album to me almost feels bogged down by its ambitions. But I have to give it to them for those ambitions. I'm going to play you one of my absolute favorite songs by this band ever from this album. I'll just play it for you and let you hear it. Well, I wish I could just listen to that whole thing with you and share that experience. Man, to come from where they had just been for 4 records straight and do stuff like that with that airy, I mean, that's not, it's like, well, how do you even describe that? It's not really, it's sort of folky. It's like art folk almost. That song was written by Ben Shepherd, who eventually replaced Hiro Yamamoto and wrote some of their most interesting stuff. And as Chris Cornell's songwriting sensibilities grew more accessible, Ben Shepherd was this perfect counterpoint to that because he had a real quirky, like very artistic, creative mind. And he wrote quite a bit and brought this counterweight to Cornell's increasing penchant towards commercialism, and really kept them anchored in a way that I think they would not have been had he not been there. And that song, I think the Rolling Stone review that ran that year in 1994 compared that song to Captain Beefheart. I don't know how well that comparison holds up, but I remember thinking, wow, that's really cool. I know Kim Thiel compared Ben Shepherd's overall presence to Captain Beefheart or to its specific album, but he wasn't talking about this song. Just what an eerie, spaced out, deep, profound, moving, unconventional song from this alternative rock, sort of quasi metal, heavy band. That they put that on the record. It's like, whoa. Like this album, you can tell it's like if the band were a filmmaker, this would be the moment they get recognized for being an auteur, right? That's at least what they're going for, and for that stretch of songs and other points, scattered about towards the beginning and towards the end, I think they achieved it. So I just don't. I've never been able to just sit through this record all the way through though, and I don't love the way it's mixed in spots. I find it sort of unnecessarily remote and clouded in the way it sounds. But other than that, I mean, it's very, very, very ambitious. I can see why it's a classic, although it is not my favorite. It's only in the number 3 slot, and I almost bumped it down to the number 4 slot. So next, let's see. Shall I play something or shall I discuss first? So this is an album I spent a lot of my interview with THAYIL from a few weeks ago talking about and addressing. I unfortunately I have seen evidence that this album is almost like sort of tragically reframed because of the circumstances around like what happened after it was made. The band broke up less than a year after this album was released. And because of that, it then ended up recasting a different light on the music in hindsight, where up to that point, the music felt a certain way. And then you listen to it knowing, well, wow, these guys were, a year away from coming to pieces, from coming unglued. It's almost impossible not to hear it between the grooves, to read between the grooves. However, when I listen to it, I do hear certain things. I do hear a kind of, how should I put it? Particularly in some of the drums, sometimes I hear there isn't somebody pushing Matt Cameron to sound more alive. He's a super interesting drummer. One of my favorites, actually. There are moments where I feel a little bit of not lifelessness, but something not quite energized, even though the execution of the parts is there. And that's because they had a bad experience working with Michael Beinhorn on Super Unknown, so they ended up producing themselves for this album, which I wouldn't say was a mistake, but there isn't enough outside perspective to say, hey, can we make that take sound a little more alive? Even my absolute favorite song on this album, I feel, has a little bit of there's something about it in one spot that it kind of seems like it's dragging its feet a little bit. However, that said, this is by far Soundgarden's most creatively varied and far-reaching album. I was talking just now about how they were reaching far on Super Unknown. They reached further than that for this album. I love the way it sounds. I absolutely love the way it's recorded. It's mixed. It has an incredible sense of atmosphere. I know I've been saying that a lot, but I mean, this album sounds, it's got such a rich sense of space. And while we have looked in hindsight and said, well, they broke up, so things must have been going wrong and they must have been falling apart. When I listened to this album after it was released, like you know, when in real time, contemporary with its release, I felt like this was the sound of a band not falling apart, but flexing its full creative capabilities and saying we can do what we want. Like I said to THAYIL, I said, to me it came off as like, if we want to be like Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin, if we want to make our answer to that, we'll do it because we want to, because we now have all these colors on our palette. And if you listen to the interview, you will see this was an issue for THAYIL, who felt his guitar playing was being stretched and applied in ways he did not feel were natural to his style of playing. So he did his best to accommodate the requests of his bandmates, all of whom wrote songs, and they brought individual demos to him and said, hey, can you make my guitar, or can you make your guitar sound like my demo? He chafed at that. He resisted that. And he was like, well, wait, I like, now I feel like a session player in my own band. He didn't communicate it to them, actually. He didn't say anything to them. He says it in the book, and we talked about it at length. But when you read that and when you hear him talk about it, and then you see that he only wrote one tune on here. You know, he started out as the band's only guitar player. Chris Cornell starts playing a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more guitar as you go along. And then suddenly, you know, he's on almost every song. And he's bringing fully fleshed out demos, and he's playing all the intros to some of these songs. You know, Kim Thayil doesn't play on the intro to Rusty Cage. He doesn't play on the intro to Burden in My Hand, you know, off of this album. He doesn't play on the intro to Black Hole Sun. You know, you start to think, well, gee, you know, was his role being marginalized? Was he being sort of pushed to the side? You know, is he a diminished presence on Down on the Upside? And then you listen to it, and it's like, actually, the opposite is true. Yeah, okay, he's not on some of the intros. He explained this to me in my interview. Check out the link. You won't be sorry if you love Soundgarden and you want some of the inside scoop. But he's not on some of the intros. He's all over this record otherwise. The way either he applied himself or they applied him and they stretched that specific thing that he does that he was known for, even though he went kicking and screaming, it sounds beautiful. And it's all over the album. It's like somebody took a paintbrush or paintbrushes of different thicknesses, dipped into that Kim Thayil guitar sound, that very signature approach that he has, and just went like this and like flecked or speckled all the music with his touch. I'm actually going to play you 3 different examples from this album just because I've seen write-ups for this album, retrospectives, where it's like, oh, you know, this is a death rattle of an album. That's actually a cool write-up. I forgot which site it was. Was it Echoes and Dust? I can't remember which site it was, where somebody wrote, you know, this is a furious death rattle of an album. They were actually complimenting the album. But to me, and to Thayil himself, it actually doesn't sound like a band about to fall apart. He has bucked against that notion the entire time. Ever since it was released, it's like it doesn't sound like a band falling apart. Was either. I think it sounds like a band spreading its wings, and it would have been really awesome to see what they would do after this. We never got to see that. You know, I mean, we eventually got to see something, but I mean, it would have been cool to see what they would have come back with 2 years later. Nevertheless, I think this album has incredible breadth. I think it is also incoherent as a song sequence. It's very jumbled. Took me years to appreciate this album in its full, like, start to finish. I can listen to it that way now, but it took me decades to do it. However, from the very beginning, you can hear THAYIL and how, again, it's like they used flecks of his paint flecks, splattering them all over the sound in this really, really gorgeous way. Check this out. So there's that. So there's that. I mean, the texture of that wah part is just breathtaking. It's really, really, really gorgeous. And that they got that color out of him reluctantly too is just amazing. Here's another example, a similar kind of thing, like or not a similar exact sound, but like another case of him leaving his stamp on this music in such a profound way. It just makes my hair stand up. So let me play this. Let me just add this. Blah, 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 blah. Whoops. Wrong tune. Wrong tune. Here we go. Man, that just makes my hair stand up like that. It's like the way that just carries over the horizon of this music. It's like stardust, falling from the sky. The sense of space is so wide and beautiful. It's almost like a Western rockscape or something. And that they were projecting, like seeing like a laser show or like a planetarium type show out in the desert somewhere. That's how rich the sense of space on this music is. I'll play you one other section of a song. First, I'm going to find it. I love this little section of this tune. Reaches me so profoundly I could cry listening to it. So let's see. Okay, here we go. So here it is. This is not going to be a graceful entrance because I'm not fading it in or anything, but check this out. So this little bit. So that is one of my all-time favorite tracks by them. It's called Dusty. It is the Quasi title track. It was again written by Ben Shepherd. And that man, that is so I don't even know what it is. I can't even describe why, but I just find that so moving. And you can hear Chris humming in the background, or he's singing, but it's like very, very low. It's almost like it was a scratch performance that was just there when he was like recording the basic idea. It wasn't meant to be kept, and they're like, no, keep it in there. Just beautiful. This album has many moments like this for any of its flaws. What they achieved in terms of a mix, in terms of creating a sense of space, is absolutely stunning. And I really wish, I mean, even I feel sad and wistful when I hear this record, because I know it was made by a band about to break up, even though it doesn't sound that way. It's like, man, this is it, kind of, and it's unfortunate. This is a band I thought was going to continue to make more records, and this was their final statement for a long time. So moving from the number 2 slot, we can only go to the number 1 slot, and that obviously leaves Badmotorfinger, the aforementioned album I heard when when I was getting high my sophomore year, and listened to it, got all pumped, and went down to the vending machine to steal stuff with sticking my hand up into the machine. I don't know when this album elevated to the status as one of my favorite albums ever. I think this is one of the greatest works of art ever made. It has for a long time been in a rotation with 3 albums that kind of nip at the number 1 slot of my favorite album ever. It's up there. I find this album has a mystical charge that even exceeds just about anything else in their catalog, and that's saying a lot for me. I remember saying to that same friend who brought the tape home, this was decades later, I had this realization while listening to this album. Whatever it is that furiously pushes a blade of grass to press from the ground, that aspect that would be screaming if we could hear it is the same force that I hear in this album from start to finish. And I did not think my friend would understand that. I didn't think he would, not that he's not a deep listener of music. I just thought it was a pretty, it was a really kind of arcane way of hearing music. I don't even think that's the right word, but like, I didn't think he would necessarily pick up on what I was feeling. And he said, "Oh, I totally know what you're saying. This album is the sound of nature. It's the sound of nature." I then shared that same sentiment with another friend of mine at the time, thinking he wouldn't resonate with that. And he said, "This album is the sound of nature." It's like, well, okay, wait a minute. So this is coming across. I don't know, even though I love this album from the beginning, from the moment that my friend Jerry brought it to my college dorm, I don't know that I would have said I was quite as blown away and moved in my spirit by this album as I eventually became. And I'm not sure when along the way that happened, but I feel like in most cases, music takes you back to the time you first heard it. So like one of my other favorite albums of all time, the one that I mostly put in the number 1 slot, to be honest, is Ritual to the Habitual by Jane's Addiction. And every time I hear it, I am transported back to walking into my college dorm room on the first day, that first afternoon, and the scent of the wood in that room. The association with the music is so powerful, it takes me back in time. Badmotorfinger, on the other hand, has grown with me and always feels like it's in the present. It's like a friendship, a deep, profound friendship that evolves with me over time and grows with me. And it feels like it's this eternal presence. This is how deep I think this album is. And I think part of the reason why I didn't necessarily pick up on just how deep my love for this album is at the time is because when Super Unknown was released, my initial impression was, wow, they've really broadened their palette. Wow, this is a more ambitious record. They're accomplishing more with more. And then years later, I was like, actually, no. This is like a director who goes from working in black and white to working in color. And the first time they work in color, you're like, wow, it's so colorful. It's so dazzling. Oh my God. And then you take some time, maybe a decade and a half. Could have been well into the 2000s that I really started to dawn on me how much this album means to me. I think it was always there, but I'm not sure I was as aware of it. Where I was like, actually, wait a minute, no. The black and white, the more seemingly limited palette or range of color, all the gray tones, all the shading, all the lighting, all the shadows. When this director worked in black and white on this film, they got more out of it. Number one, I think this album from start to finish is a complete masterpiece. It is, to say it's enthralling is an understatement. I find this album physically and emotionally exhausting in the best possible way. It has this uniformity of sound and tonality that I think works in its favor, actually, because the variety in the song construction and the song writing matched with this uniform set of tones and almost the same mix, not exactly, but pretty much you're in the same sort of sonic space for 12 chapters, but then with all these peaks and valleys, works spectacularly. Whereas Super Unknown and Down on the Upside vary quite a bit. You're like getting all these different flavors from song to song to song. This maintains a focus, a cohesion that is just spectacular. And then the emotional depth of this music, which was not well represented at all by the video for Outshined or by the video for Jesus Christ Pose. See Chris Cornell running around bare-chested. You totally get the wrong idea. You think these guys are kind of oafish. There's such a profound charge. Then this is also the first album with Ben Shepherd. He writes a bunch of tunes, or he contributes to the writing. Instantly, his quirky, more artsy, more edgy, unconventional approach flows right into the pool of their collective thing. And you have this person who actually didn't play bass, was a guitar player, but then has this really interesting approach on bass, who becomes, although Hiro Yamamoto wrote quite a bit as well, but he immediately lives up to that same type of role. And he's like, no, I'm a creative part of this band. This is, to me, a textbook case. Might as well be the poster child. There are some albums where you can just hear everything come together for a band, everything click into place, and they climb the mountain. They're at the top. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, they became everything they could be. They became what they are in full stride. That's what I hear on this record from start to finish. It is a powerhouse of an album. I hate when people look back on this album or this band, but this album in particular, they're like, oh, it's riffs and it's grunge and it's also, it's like, blah, 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 blah. You're way like looking at this with blinders on if that's all you hear. Again, it's the sound of nature. There is I don't even want to call it an anguished cry. There's almost a non-human shriek silently, actually, if that makes any sense at all. Probably doesn't make any sense, but it's like there's a a universal uh irre- what's the word I'm looking for? A universal, like, animal and spiritual drive to live and to assert one's own existence. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining the vibe I always feel when I hear this record. It's like this, again, like a silent shriek, although the music is not silent and Cornell is actually shrieking. That's not what I mean. There's like an electricity that infuses this whole album that feels to me like nature's unrelenting thrust to be, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And I can hear it loud and clear, just like this buzz in the music. I can't explain it. You know, when this album was re-released in its 25th anniversary super deluxe 7 disc edition, um, they got a bunch of other musicians, well-known musicians. In fact, I will read to you from the review I wrote for Pitchfork on that exact release. Um, Let me go here. Let me share this real quick, because I think it's important. So here we go. Where are we here? In the oversized coffee table booklet that accompanies the 7 disc super deluxe version of this reissue, 36 musicians offer their recollections, including Henry Rollins, Les Claypool, Vernon Reid, Kirk Hammett, Buzz Osborne, Dale Clover, Chris Novoselic, Tom Morello, Steve Von Till, etc., etc. High praise even comes from ancestral giants like Zeppelin leader Jimmy Page, Sabbath bassist Geezer Butler, and Rush guitarist Alex Lifeson. I think there's one person of that entire bunch that even approached identifying what I'm saying about this, what I hear in this music, and my two friends I mentioned too, what they hear. There's something mystical, spiritually supercharged about this album, and the way they sustain it from the very beginning all the way through the very last note with this exhausting, like, it's like this mountain trek through all these different moods is I can't even describe how impressive it is. And I actually hate even hearing these guys talk about this record. Like they like like I don't know, like they don't, it's like they don't even know what they captured. Maybe because they kept striving for more, to expand more and more. And they're like, yeah, that's where we were at back then. But like, I don't think they have any idea just how magnificent of an achievement this album is. I haven't even played any bits from it. I will play you my favorite song on this album. It's hard to choose one, but I've often thought if there were to be a song played at my funeral, I would want it to be this one. The only thing that would stop me is that it wouldn't necessarily communicate to everyone else. Like if you didn't know the song or you didn't understand how much it meant to me, and you just know me, would it connect with you? I don't think so. But in terms of what I would want people to feel at that, um, to mark my passage into whatever's next, I would want it to sound like this. This takes a little bit to warm up.
This is My Good Eye. Do you hear a cow? A rooster says, here is a pig. The devil says,
Unfortunately, I cannot play more than that, and I'll probably already get in trouble. Looking for the paradigm so I can pass it off. The lyrics, too, on this album really take the cake, I think, more than anything else. Somehow they hit on this stride that I don't think they quite. I think they declined lyrically from here, and it was a climb up to here. This is the mountain. To me, this is the pinnacle of their lyrical, like how evocative they could be lyrically. I'm going to read to you a little bit from this review. I already mentioned this. You know, there's the high-end ambient buzz that permeates the album from start to finish, imbuing it with a static charge, not unlike the electricity one feels in the air when the entire sky darkens under a massive storm cloud. Indeed, much of Badmotorfinger's power resides in its suggestion of a violence that rarely erupts and offers little catharsis when it does. I'm going to read that again because I think I flubbed it. Indeed, much of Badmotorfinger's power resides in its suggestion of a violence that rarely erupts and offers little catharsis when it does. I'm going to... As you listen more closely, it becomes increasingly apparent that none of the songs lend themselves to primary hues like angry, sad, or even rocking. In its most rousing moments, Badmotorfinger is anchored by a pensiveness that fosters daydreaming as much, if not more, than it gives you reason to bang your head. Fittingly, the album's lyrics venture well beyond heavy rock's typical purview. Where other bands would choose to emote more directly from the gut or elsewhere, Soundgarden temper the attack of the music with painterly images Cornell delivers with beatnik flair. There's so much here, but I will read the ending. Searching with My Good Eye Closed, which is the song I just played for you, is the most dramatic example of Soundgarden's ability to touch the otherworldly. If you listen very closely to the fade out, you can hear the last wisp of Cornell's voice trailing off. It's barely audible and lasts for just half a second before it's smothered out of the frame by the leaden trudge of Room 1,000 Years Wide. The same thing essentially happened with the band's career 2 years later, when Soundgarden went on to sell 5 million and became alterna rock household names with their next album, 1994's Super Unknown. But as both albums have aged, you can make a case that Soundgarden actually accomplished more with the comparatively limited shading of Badmotorfinger. Yes, I read this right before going live, so I'm hitting some of the same notes. Listening back now, and I wrote this in 2016, it's an album that would have sounded fresh and vital, released at any time over the past quarter century. So yeah, that's how I feel about this record. I think I covered everything. I'm not positive. I mean, I could probably just talk for an hour about this album alone, or do like little dives into individual tracks. There's a lot of variety on it, and that variety, again, mixed with the consistency of the tone, I just think is the perfect balance. It's the perfect balance. And there's a hunger. They were still hungry at this point. They were still climbing up the mountain to achieve something. I think they got more ambitious, they kept getting more and more ambitious with the two records after this, but there's a spirit here in their, like, there's a stride in the way they got here that I think you can hear it in the record. Whereas the two albums after this, they start to get bogged down almost, and I don't hear that weight. I hear like reaching, the sound of reaching someplace and being intrepid enough to get there, to find their way there, to find their way to some distant shore, which is a magical, wonderful place to be. If you haven't spent time with this album, or you love this band or like them, or are casually into them, or you've just always thought of this album, um, because of all the hype around Seattle at the time, do yourself a favor, sit with this, lock yourself in a room, turn the phone off, get away from any distractions, sit with it from start to finish. It's like going into like a I don't know, a vision quest, or like a hot springs ritual or something, where you like don't eat, and like you just let the steam carry you to some other realm of perception. It's a very, very, very powerful work of music. I think it is one of the greatest works of art ever made, ever captured on tape. It is my number one Soundgarden album, at the top of my ranking, head and shoulders above everything else. And again, that's saying a lot, because I love pretty much all their other stuff too. so, saying a lot. But that's what I think. What do you think? Where do you rank Soundgarden's main albums? If you want, I'll do a whole nother episode with all those other extra releases I was talking about, and I'll rank those too. But I want to hear from you. How do you rank these 7 releases? I should give honorable mention to 2 things, though. Satan Oscillate My Metallic Sonatas, which is an EP that was added to Super Unknown, has 4 tunes that I would rank quite high on this list if they got their own place. They do they do 3 covers in a row. They do their reinterpretation of the Black Sabbath tune Into the Void. They do their version of Stray Cat Blues by the Rolling Stones from Beggar's Banquet. And they do Girl You Want by Devo. And while you would expect that the Sabbath cover would be the best fit for them, they completely reinvent the Devo song and the Stones tune in a way that I find magical and awesome. They change the cadence of both songs, not so much the Stones tune quite as much, actually, but they really wear those songs well, and they bring their own stamp to them in a way that's, I think, is incredible. And so I would add that as an honorable mention. And even though I'm not going to rank the first Hater album with Ben Shepherd and Matt Cameron, it does deserve honorable mention here, because what's amazing to me about that album is that it sounds like Ben Shepherd was trying to make the album sound half-assed, but he's so gifted that it doesn't work. Let me repeat that. I think he was trying to be abrasive, half-assed, kind of like a wise ass, kind of like get on your nerves almost. This is Ben and Matt Cameron doing their take on a scratchy lo-fi kind of thing, almost in the same vein as stuff like Pavement and Sebado, Guided by Voices. Shepard's vocal approach, it's like he's trying to be annoying, trying to be grating, almost like he needed to compensate for his anxieties about Soundgarden being popular. That some of that is in Kim Thiel's book. I remember he had a quote back in the 90s saying that, hearing how popular Outshined was made him hate the song. His outbursts on stage for years are well documented. But even still, he still doesn't succeed in getting in his own way, if that's in fact what he was trying to do. or in the way of the artfulness of the music. I love that album. I would consider it almost an honorary addition to this list. I'm not sure where I would rank it. I might even put it above Louder Than Love and Super Unknown, which is saying a lot. I might. I'm not quite sure. Or even maybe right in between them or a tie or something. It's that enjoyable. So if you like Soundgarden, I would say definitely check out that first Hater album. It's self-titled. Definitely deserves honorable mention. But yeah, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Please do hit all the buttons. And yeah, that's pretty much that. You can make a donation. Like I said, check out the links in the description. There are a bunch of them. I linked to my reviews and write-ups and feature articles and various outlets in the show notes. Otherwise, for Feedback Def, I am Sabby Reyes Kulkarni, the apostate music journalist. Thanks for hanging with me and for listening with me. Over and out.